Thought I'd better get some.
Yes.
Right, just make yourself comfortable in your chair, then try and sit forward for a few moments. And as always, we should never feel that we're stuck in this position or any position really. Sometimes when you're in a posture, you're doing something, there can be all sorts of resistance to that. And some of it is just sort of like a mental resistance sometimes. Other times there's a more clear physical reason. It's quite hard to distinguish those, but always the idea is not to overdo things. Don't feel you're stuck in a particular movement or anything like that. But this posture, in theory, allows us a great deal of support through feet and hips and legs, as well as the chair, slightly angled forwards, a longer, broader feeling to your back. So the front of your body seems to just drop down. And rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And as you get to the big muscles of, say, your arms and legs and those kind of things, see if you can just get that sense of resonance, so that the muscle seems to vibrate, like a drum vibrating. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. Okay, and then sitting back in your chair with your feet out, that resonant quality comes partly from the muscle that you're striking, but also from the way that you're striking. It's not a hard sort of strike, as I've said before, it's like hitting a drum. And it's an indication for the sort of quality, not only in the muscles, but also how we use the arms in Tai Chi. This sort of quality that's a curious combination of a very smooth movement with a kind of heavy quality in the arms. But that applies to the whole body in a way. It's just resting back, getting a little bit more support from the chair, particularly those points where you're in contact with the chair. Feeling quite heavy in the chair. So just allowing the chair to take your weight. Quite a difficult thing to do, to just essentially let go in that way. And we can often find ourselves, we could be sitting chatting, watching the television, listening to the radio, not having to do anything, sitting in a nice comfortable chair, and yet finding that we're holding a shoulder or a hand, or we've gripped our hands tight or something like that. Maybe that our back is tight. We do hold on to that tension, that tightness, just out of habit, and those habits are built up for all sorts of reasons. So what we want to try and do is not get too fanatical about I must let this go, because that can often just reinforce the blockage in the area. What we can do is start to look at other ways. Can we sort of adjust ourselves in the chair that allows that release in those areas, if only for a few moments. Sometimes we move like that, but then 5 minutes later the habit kick back in. But gradually we replace the old habits with new, much more positive habits. Notice how you're breathing. In this position, our breath tends to go deeper. We feel a bit of movement in our belly, as well as solar plexus and chest. Quieter quality to the flow of the breathing. Then bringing your feet in, and now back to the chair is still there. Your feet and legs, buttocks, hips, lower back. But of course, the upper part of your body, very dependent on them now because you're not using the back of the chair, unless you need to sit back and rest, of course, which is fine. But that same thing again, slightly broader in your back, rib cage hanging down. And feeling supported, particularly in your upper body, from within, from this area in and around the spine, the middle of your back, holding you up like a kind of central support, and the rest of your skeleton, even the rib cage itself, creating, holding a shape which the soft tissue of your body feels almost like it's draped around, like a tailor's dummy with a garment wrapped around it. Again, just notice your breathing if you're comfortable with that. And then just slowly turning your head. So we want to preserve this quality of being supported from within and as much as possible moving from those areas of support rather than what feels more like the outside of the body. It's quite difficult to describe, but when the movement feels like it permeates the whole of our body. So here, can you feel just the top few vertebrae of your back moving a little bit and the muscles going down your back? And then shoulders. And then going forwards. Using that awareness of posture and how it interrelates with movement and the quality of the movement. Help you to keep this focus of attention. And then hands down by your sides. We want the movements to be deliberate, to be intentional. So we can use an awareness of our posture, how we're making the movements. We can use the imagery and so on and so forth, just various things to sort of almost create a shape in our mind for the movement. And then winding around. And back the other way. Rest your hands. Easing forwards and pushing back. Moving, rocking on those bones at the base of the pelvis, using the legs, your hips, your lower back, and the springiness that build over time in those areas of the body, so that as you go forward, you're loading the legs and then they push back. And to a lesser extent in hips and lower back, the same thing happening. And then turning towards one leg. So feeling the distinction between the full leg, where most of the weight is, and the empty leg and other parts of the body, the hips as well, where there's less weight. And feeling the change. One part of the body feels as the other empties. And then return, same thing in the other direction. And then around, feeling the transition between hips and feet. As that pressure of the weight flows like almost like a ball going around the perimeter of a circle. Not quite as random as that. Back the other way. One more time. Come back to the center. And then raise one heel and step out. Really measuring your step. You want to be able to get the foot change over now. You want to be able to get your foot fully down. And if possible, just press a little bit downwards. If your foot's too far away, that would be quite difficult. You're sort of too stretched out, really, particularly for the pressing in part. Okay, and then bring your feet down. Hands down to your sides, turn your hands forwards and going forwards, rotating your arm. Bird folds its wings. But when you're familiar with these movements, that concept of deliberate intent, conscious intent, really helps us to flow in the movement. We have an idea of what it looks like. It's not fixed. It can vary, of course, really from one moment to the next, but the overall shape is there, the familiarity with the routines that we use, the sequences of movements. So that process of intending the movement has something to follow, something to make use of. And then, even your hands facing backwards. Sink back, let your arms swing from your shoulders. Fisherman cast the net. Feel the weight of your arms, a nice sort of massaging quality of movement in your shoulders, across your upper back. And then just letting your arms move as though you're rolling the ball in towards your chest. And then pigeon spreads its wings, chest opening and closing, and as the chest closes, your back opens. There's a lovely sense of the upper part of your torso. It's very gently massaged by the movement. So I'm leaving your hands more or less in that same angle, but your elbows go out a bit as you come back, making the change to pushing wave. Not as clear, but there is still that opening and closing, that movement in chest and upper back. It's very much gets in underneath the movement itself. And, you know, we can often trace movements back. With this one should be fairly clear. You know, you can connect down to that movement in the chest, upper back, down into your hips, feet, and the movement of your weight. And then not coming back quite so far, your elbows stay tucked in, hands are fisted, rotating as you go forward. You can see my hands aren't really aren't very much above my leg. They're not right up here. I'm not bending my elbow. I go forwards, and the shoulder pushes on the elbow and wrist, and my arm just extends a little bit and rotates, and then comes back. This time my elbow doesn't go out; it comes back towards my hip. And then this time, push out, open your fingers, turn your hands out, and wind it around. One more time. And then winding back, turn your hands palm down, polishing the table. Smooth circle, letting your back just open up a little bit, but not straining, not straining to push your hands forwards. So your hips dropping back just lengthening, your arms lengthening, the fingers lengthening, and then everything contracting in. The back, across your shoulders down to your elbows and wrists, and finally your fingertips back into your seat. Do one more on each side, in each direction. Let your hands drop, turn your hands palm up. A little bit of a push from both feet and hips at the same time. Just an upward movement when they meet in the middle and then draining away. So your weight now about 70% in your hips, 30% in your feet. Now turn your hands out, wild goose. Same thing, you're using your feet and your hips to generate the initial movement, upper body expanding and contracting. And then parting the clouds, a little bit forwards to let your hands drop in front of your knees, back into your hips, and again that push up through feet and hips. And one more time. So now just letting your arms drop down. Just rest in this position for a few moments. Feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. And then raising your hands and see if you can feel the same weight just pushing down through your shoulders, your back, your hips into almost like you can feel the weight of your arms pushing your hips more in to the chair. Find a good position for your arms. You won't hold this for as long. Now that you've got a sense for the weight of your arms, let them drop down again. And then going into Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. See if just for a moment at the top here, you can get that same sense of the the weight of your arm flowing down through your body rather than having to strain in the shoulder to keep it in position as you're doing this twisting, plucking movement, winding movement. One more on each side after this one. All of these things start to come together, all these different elements start to come together quite naturally. We need to break them apart sometimes to really work on one thing, but gradually becoming part of a greater picture. And once again, this time when you bring your hands up, bring them closer together, but again, can you feel the weight dropping down through shoulders, hips, back, so that you're not kind of straining in your shoulders to hold your arms up. This is quite a different way of moving for many of us. Now bring your hands down again, this time to this position, and then pushing out. If we can find a position for our hands just resting there again, that is less effort, less strain, shall we say. It's not less effort, it's a different type of effort. Bringing your hands in, then alternating those two movements. If we can find that position at each end of the movement, and with this one, it's fairly straightforward here, isn't it? It's down, it's a comfortable position for most of us. But if we can find the position that we're going to in a comfortable way, then the transition from one to another becomes smoother. And so we begin to develop this very different way of moving. So you're moving through water, finding the path of least resistance, finding the way to move that doesn't increase tension, the straining in your body, rather encourages this internal quality of flow. It doesn't mean that it's not a strong exercise, of course, because you are beginning to use your body more, and you will begin to use more of your body for any one particular movement. And this is a principle we can apply, try to apply in all of the movements. So now changing to scooping the sea, looking at the sky. Yeah, this is quite a tricky movement, but just let your hips drop back, feel how your arms are being pulled up, and try and keep at the front of your attention that feeling of your arms being supported in positions that maybe you wouldn't normally associate with that. And so one of the things that guides our intent isn't just an idea that this is where the hands go and where the feet go, but also this is how it feels. One more time. And then changing, grasping the tiger's ears. So just as you might know, if you went into to a room in your house to get something and you didn't turn the light on, you'd have an idea of the layout, where the chairs are. You wouldn't walk as fast. You might just put your hand out a little bit and kind of feel your way around. So you have an idea of how to move, of course, an idea of the kind of geography of the environment, to start to work together. Now, changing over. So this idea of intentional movement, a deliberate, a conscious intention, as opposed to the unconscious intentions that we seem to have a lot of, actually leads us to a much more considered movement, much more fluid movement. And it includes the whole range of things, from the kind of technical awareness of what we're doing through to that feeling of the arms being right somehow. And then changing. And then bring your feet parallel. So see if you can make some of that work in Part the Wild Horse's Mane, just a little bit more complicated. And a lot of your conscious intention is going to be on the shape of the movement. And it's not like we forget about those other things, or they just slip back into random habit. We're still aware of them on a slightly background level, or maybe subconscious level, if you want to think of it like that. Start with your weight back in your right hip and hold the ball. Right hand on top, left hand underneath. You're going to move forwards into that left leg. Turn in to feed the left hand out. Drop your right hand down. Come back on the same way, drawing your left arm across. Turn a little bit to the right, and then move into the left, turn a little bit to the left. Do the same thing on the other side, just parting the wild horse's mane. Weight moves forwards a little bit, body turns to the right. Weight moves back, body turns to the left. Weight moves across the hips to the right, and your body turns to the right, and you're starting again. Parting the wild horse's mane. Good. And then just letting your hands rest again. Once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. the belly. Anyways. Okay, and then pushing your heels up. And circling around. And then back the other way. Okay. And then stand. I'm going to move my chair out of the way, but as always, you can leave the chair there if you feel you want a little bit of support. If you do that, just sort of, it can be nice just to have the chair there ready, if you see what I mean, or you could stand next to a wall or something like that. To begin with, have your feet parallel and just begin to rock your weight forwards and backwards. There's a couple of things about this. I'm going to get a bowl and show you. One is that when I stand still in this position, I can imagine a hole going up through my body. It would actually come out through the crown of my head. It wouldn't be to the side. And I line myself up with that pole. Now, when I start to move, you can see here, I'm moving away from the pole in one direction. I go back, and then I move away the other way. Oops. Well, you know, I was going to say, what happens is when I go too far is I fall over. But in fact, if I'm aware of this line, then after a while, I'm less likely to drift too far from it. It's a bit like a boat moored to a post on the sea. It moves away, the rope tightens and pulls it back. And your own awareness is part of that. And indeed, again, one of these sort of subconscious intentions is to always maintain a connection with that center line. The other thing about this, and another use of that center line, is to actually let it move with me. And you can see now I've still got the imaginary center line there, but what I've done, my whole body has angled forward. I haven't done this, for instance, and come away from that center line. So I suppose, you know, if I had a second pole, it would be there, and this would be passing through it. Yeah. So again, this is an idea that may help you to build this movement. Not everything's going to work for you, and sometimes we need to hear things more than once, but a lot more than once in my case. In my case, for many of the things, and actually they gradually become part of the overall picture. So the intent is to move within the environment that picture suggests. So just letting yourself come to rest in that position, more in line with the pull of gravity in your body, and then sinking down, bringing your hands around and pushing up. So you're lifting the ball and sinking down. So actually, what I want, again, I'm going to take the pole and show you. Hopefully the visual impression will be useful. The pole is just behind the ball of my foot, and so here, in the higher position, my hips dropping back just a little bit. You can see there, but when my hips drop down more, I don't go back like this because I'm going to fall over. What happens is my pelvis tucks under, so I've still got that line with the pull of gravity. You could almost imagine you're sliding up and down the pole, in fact. And again, these ideas lead us to an awareness of the feeling of the movements. Change into the wild goose. And part in the clouds. One more time. Good. And shake out. So these little things combine in different orders. Now, let me show you a sort of practical use of this idea. Go into the bow stance. One foot forwards, hip width across your feet, just transferring the weight. And to begin with, I'll just show you again, going back to this. When I'm on the back foot, I'll do it the other way around. When I'm on the back foot, that's better. This pole, if this pole were in the middle, by the way, it would come to about there. It wouldn't quite reach that point in the foot where it does in the parallel stance until I'm standing on one leg, in which case I would go back to that alignment. But here, I've only got about 70% of my weight back. And then try and get it right. And then going forward, similarly, it's just slightly inside the foot. So bear that in mind. I'm going to show you from the outside there. And you can see I'm still moving as much as possible with that sense of alignment. Now, if I were just walk into the shops, I would probably angle forwards a little bit. So that would look something like this. I'll just come away a little bit from that from that center line. And I'm just in this. Now the problem is if I go too far forward, I'm going to fall. So that awareness of where the line is and how I can get back to it, which is what one of the things that we learn to do by dropping our hips, becomes again something that rests with us, not always thinking about it, but very much there in the background. These things creep up on us in my experience. We gradually learn to move subconsciously, shall we say, with these qualities. And this is where it becomes an asset outside of the actual exercises. We maintain that line with the pull of gravity. We're aware of that line with the pull of gravity. And when we move away from it, we always have a way to get back to it. And then, excuse me, raising your toes and your heel again. And so gradually that line will begin to come back to the position that it was in when we were in the parallel stance, because more and more of your weight, so more and more of your body is actually in and over one leg, until you can actually step in. And then on the other side, transferring your weight. Raising your toes and your heel. Not every model, not every idea that we use is going to work for you. Stepping in. Some will work some of the time, but not others, and in some movements and some actions. Others might not mean much at all, might come to mean something at some point. That's fine, because no one description, no one model or image is ever going to be the whole story with any of these movements. And then stepping through. And it's important not to try and make things fit. You know, if you find that idea of the pole is a useful one, then make use of it. When it ceases to become useful, you might question, well, okay, am I doing this correctly? And that can be useful. And then go back the other way. But don't sort of think, I must make this fit. It might just be that that particular image has come to the end of its usefulness. You just put it to one side for the moment. And shake out. And it's particularly important when we think about how these ideas are applied in our daily lives, because actually it's all very well to talk about alignment with the pull of gravity, and this is where the line is, and so on and so forth, on a nice flat surface, which presumably you're on. But if you were walking across the field, or even along a pavement, or stepping off the pavement onto the road and that kind of thing, there are little bumps, there are irregular pavement slabs, there are small slopes and changes. And so it's really pointing us at a sense that we're alert to and sensitive to both the internal landscape that we're moving through, but also that awareness extends externally, and we know what we're looking for. We know the feeling that we want. We know what it feels like when all we have to deal with is a flat surface and the pull of gravity. And we want it to feel the same, even though, you know, maybe it's a bit tilted. Maybe we need to do that. Maybe we don't have that upright quality, and yet the body still has that same kind of feeling to it. So right foot forwards, and once again, fisherman cast the net. So various terms that we can use for that overall feeling. One that I really like, for some reason, is the Chinese term zhongding, which we translate as central equilibrium. There's a very distinctive feel. You know, if you've ever ridden a bike or driven a car, operating any kind of machinery, you kind of know when it's working well. You don't have to think, oh, do I need to do this or whatever. It's only when it stops working well. There's a sense of rightness about it. But you can put whatever label you like on it. And we're trying to maintain central equilibrium in all its aspects, mind and body, regardless of the environment, the conditions that we're moving through. And go into your back foot, turn to your right. This time that just directs your arms in different directions. Sends one forwards, one backwards. So kind of splitting the movement by turning in the center of your body. Where are the limits to the movement? I can get to about here. This feels fine, but this today feels I'm losing that quality of central equilibrium and my associations with it in my chest and my upper back. So I don't have to think, oh, this is the, do I go here? It becomes just natural to move in that way. Okay. And then left foot forwards, fisherman cast the net. And wind blows the willows. You can turn the front foot out just a little bit, and this time stepping through. If you want to bring the foot here, or maybe up, or maybe rotate, turn as you do. Again, what is appropriate at the moment? Can you maintain central equilibrium is what we're looking to be able to do. And then take a step back, or in the other direction, if you haven't done so already. And then bring the feet down. Go back to your chair. To embrace tiger, return to mountain, the final movement can help us to really reinforce that sense of Zhongding, of central equilibrium, and most particularly how we get back to it. Um, and I think it's a really good movement to end on because of that. You know, I've gone into various technical details. Sometimes, oh, I didn't remember that, and so on and so forth. But do remember that, you know, we're really trying to build an intuitive sense, intentional. It's not unintended, but but the intention is guided by that sense of an intuitive understanding, because we don't want to have to stop and think about it all the time. It's like, you know, if you sit down to write a letter, then, you know, kind of like you know, you don't sit down and think, right, A follow it comes before B, and then I have C, remembering the alphabet, and you're not having to think about, you know, sort of like the rules of grammar or anything like that straight away. Sometimes you may stop and think, oh, hold on, how do I do this, or whatever. But mostly, and it's the same in conversation, mostly we just go ahead and talk or write or whatever. Occasionally stop and have to think about it. So, well, you know, it's intentional, and part, you know, the background theory, you could call it, has almost been built into our intuitive attention in that sense. So let your hands drop down and embrace tiger, return to mountain. One more round. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.